So this episode is in part brought to you by water because I'm trying to limit my caffeine consumption, which so far isn't really working out that well. But today we are going to talk about two things. One's a writer, the other one's a broken shower, which are both pretty interesting things, at least to me. So in the future, I want to make more videos that are kind of like this, sort of like unedited, unscripted, or just kind of like a stream of consciousness, should I say? Because I've got nowhere to hide if I don't have an editing software, right? I can't edit something out. If I sound stupid, I'm going to sound stupid. If I sound like an idiot, I'm going to remain an idiot. So today, let's try out this. I mean, this is really like the old video format. If you've been here long enough, you know, this is like how I used to do things. But I think right now, I'm just tired of short content on the internet. I just want to make something that's like a little more, should I say, a little deeper, a little more like stimulating. So in the future, expect more of these like longer videos because I really want to drive a point home because that requires time and it requires patience. So let's start today's video with an introduction to a very interesting French writer. So if you haven't read this guy, pick up one of his books, or did he write more than one book? But he was a writer that was extremely famous for one of his books. And this book was a book of aphorisms and essays. Not essays. It was a book of aphorisms, right? So aphorisms and maxims. So his name was François La Rochefoucauld. And, you know, that immediately presented a challenge because back in the days, the most prominent French people, they all had like the same last names, right? And a lot of them were dukes. So there were probably like 4 La Rochefocaulds in the 17th century. And then you move on to the 18th century, there are more La Rochefocaulds because these were, you know, prominent family names. But one of these La Rochefocaulds, he wrote a book of aphorisms and maxims in the 17th century, which is going to set up the entire tone for today's discussion. And he wrote this book in a very noisy French salon. And the really interesting thing about these salons is that, you know, people had no tolerance for boring stuff. It's not like a university lecture hall where the professor could just feed you anything, you know. It could be something boring, could be something interesting, and you as a student sitting there, you basically have to eat it up. But these weren't students at the salons. They were people that were agitated. They were people that had like, you know, really short attention span because literally people who were speakers at the salons, they were competing with like lemon tarts. They were competing with lemonades. They were competing with lobsters. They were competing with all these royal snacks at the salons. So people who were speakers, they had to develop a way of communicating their insights that was sharp, that was straight to the point, with no BS, basically. So La Rochefoucauld took all these lessons to heart and wrote up this very, very concise, very pithy book of aphorisms, which when I read it, I'm just like, oh my God, all of them are amazing. I think there were like 200 something aphorisms and maxims in this entire collection. So I thought to myself, oh my God, all of these are amazing. Like no wonder these people were so excited whenever La Rochefoucauld presented his aphorisms and essays. But one of them stuck with me for a very long time. One of them stayed with me for a very long time. And this one's basically, you know, translated into English because the original thing was in French. So it's basically, it basically says, we are strong enough to bear the misfortunes of others. We are strong enough to bear the misfortunes of others. So when I first read it, I'm just like, that sounds cool, I guess. I can whip it out on a date or something, you know, to sound profound. Or like whip it out at a cafe to sound, you know, to sound intelligent. But I didn't really understand it. I'm just like, what do you mean? We can tolerate the misfortunes of other people. I'm just like, that sounds kind of weird. You know, why would I tolerate? Or why would I bear the misfortunes of other people? Or am I strong enough to bear the misfortunes of other people? And I didn't understand the statement until I did, after I moved out on my parents. So this is a very interesting story because with city apartments, especially apartments in metropolitan Melbourne, the inspection stage of moving into an apartment is basically like, it's a perfect stage, right? It's like the stage where everything's in pristine condition. Everything is basically like, you know, the sink works, the microwave works, the shower works, this, you know, whatever, everything works, right? So that's how they trick you into signing a contract until you realize nothing really works. So the first day when I moved in here, there was a water leak. And I had to get a plumber here to fix the water leak. And then the shower was broken. And now the shower is still broken. So in fact, today I have to go down to the local gym. It was like 1 a.m. in the morning because my sleeping schedule was completely chaotic. It was like 1 a.m. in the morning, so I had to descend all the way downstairs to the local gym to take a shower, which wasn't a very responsible thing to do because living in the city center, the streets, they tend to get pretty sketchy at night. So I had to go down to the local gym, take a shower, and come back up, which wasn't that safe, but I did it anyway. So yeah, they're still fixing the shower. Hopefully they'll get it fixed by Friday, and today's Wednesday. But by the time this video goes live, God knows. Let's hope the shower will be fixed by then. But if I tell you the experience of 20,000 things going wrong, in this apartment, you think to yourself, oh my God, that's horrible. I don't want to move out now, right? You think to yourself, why would you put yourself through that torture? Why would you put yourself through so much crap? Because when I told you that, when I related the story to you, I'm coming at it from a very specific angle, right? I'm exclusively talking about the bad stuff. I'm exclusively just talking about all the negative shit that happened, all the stuff that could go wrong. But I'm not exactly telling you what's positive about, the positive side of you moving out. So everything, they have two sides. There's like the negative side and there's like the positive side. The thing, the evil thing with stories is that people can choose their realities, right? And the problem with other people telling you their misfortunes is that they only focus on the negatives. So you hear someone, I have to do my taxes. My car just broke down. Today's weather is terrible. I had a breakup. So when people tell you about their misfortunes, it's going to be worse in story form. When they're relating it to you, it's going to sound like 10,000 times worse than the actual thing, right? So if I come at it from a more neutral perspective, if I come at it from a more just kind of like nonchalant way of looking at it, getting the shower fixed isn't really that big of a deal. You contact a plumber, they come up, and you have to sit your ass on your couch for a few hours and watch their business. After they're done, they'll leave your apartment, and the next day you organize another time and see if they show up on time. So that's the reality of getting a shower fixed. It's a very mechanical process of they show up, you watch over them when they're working, and they leave, and you close the door, right? That's the reality of it. But when you're telling someone else that your shower's broken, you're taking on this kind of tone of this is the most horrible thing ever. I wish this would never happen to you, and no one should ever go through this. So when you're telling a story through that lens, through that kind of tone of voice, you're telling a story that's, by definition negative. So when the negative story gets into the other person's head, the other person's actually going to mistake that negative part of the story as the entire story. So they're going to start thinking, oh my God, so it is that bad. It is as bad as that description gets. Getting a shower fixed is terrible. Doing your taxes is terrible. Going through a breakup is going to be terrible. But what you'll find out later on, when you actually get a broken shower, and when you actually get a leaky pipe, when you actually move out of your parents, something really strange is going to happen, which is that you realize that it's really not that big of a deal. It's just so many of the stories that you hear from people that have been through tough things, if you go through the same things yourself, they are not going to be as bad, right? They're going to be you will make it through it. And by making through it, when you relate the story to other people, you can have the freedom to complain about it. And you complain about it, you plant the seed in their heads as though it's the most terrible thing ever. So the whole point of this entire thing is that I'm trying to tell you, basically stop taking people's complaints literally, right? Stop taking people's stop taking people's stories literally. And the problem is that we take stories literally without realizing that it's just like a lens to look at reality. And that's really the power of storytelling. The way that you tell a story can directly influence how the person sees reality. When you tell a person that a broken shower is terrible, they're gonna think it is terrible. But if you tell a story in a way that's like, man, it's just how it is. I contacted a plumber and he came up and he fixed it. And it's not gonna be as terrible as it is in the other person's head, right? But you have to somehow frame how you want to look at reality. And you have to somehow frame, I'm not saying that you should be a positive person all the time because that's just impossible. You should frame your story, the story that you're gonna have, that you're gonna conjure up when you're going through these events. Whether it is a terrible thing or it is not a terrible thing, that's up to you. I'm saying you have the power to decide whichever story you wanna attach to these events, seemingly horrible things that are happening to you. So whenever people tell you about their misfortunes, just keep in mind that you can bear them. Right, when you go through the same events, you're gonna have the resources to bear exactly the same. You basically have the capacity to bear it, because when people are telling you about their shit, they're not telling the truth. You know, something being terrible, that's just an interpretation. That's just like a judgment of reality. So when you're going through this process of listening to people's stuff, you get fearful. You get, you don't want to move out of your parents because you're like, oh my God, do I have to start doing taxes now? Do I have to contact 20 million plumbers? Or do I have to deal with broken shower now? And that puts people off from doing so many of the great things that it could be doing, which is a tragedy. So I recommend you to just take people's misfortunes with a grain of salt. Realize that storytelling is a very powerful tool. It can make you feel emotions. It can obscure your reality. But at the end, you'd really have to make up your own mind, right? You'd really have to make up your own interpretation of reality. And storytelling is going to help with that. And if you want to tell your own stories, I recommend keeping a daily diary so you can see how words can really change how you look at reality. And I'll talk more about diary keeping in the future. But I think that's all I want to talk about in this video. A broken shower, the fact that if your shower breaks, you can go through the same thing. And you have the resources to bear it. It's all about what story. It's all about the story that you relate to the actual event. That's what's going to shape your reality, right? Human stories are storytelling creatures. We are so good at storytelling that just by relating some event through a certain way of telling the story, through a certain way of phrasing, that's going to change the entire kind of emotion that you'll feel as the recipient of the story. So that's what I have for today. And before I get out of here, let me show you guys a really interesting app that I discovered recently. And today's episode was indeed brought to you by Business. So if you loved today's episode, this is kind of like me just conceptualizing what I've read, applying them to reality. So if you loved this general concept of applying book stuff into reality, if you want to connect with people that are also doing kind of the same thing, I would highly recommend this new app, Business. So basically, this is an app that connects you to an intellectual salon or a cafe where you could chat to people that are also reading the same books as you. It's not based on who you're following on Twitter. It's not based on your Instagram following. It's not based on anything, but it's based on the books that these people have read. So you could literally join the chat room, for example, for 1984. And there'll be threads of discussions, threads of things you could weave through. And if you haven't read the book, or if you're looking forward to read the book, not a problem. You can join different chat rooms based on your reading status. So if you're still reading the book, click the button and tell the app that you're still reading the book, and that's going to allocate you into the room. That's going to group you with the people that are actually haven't started reading the book yet. But if you have already read the book, you should mark yourself as read, and that's going to allocate you into this room with all of the people that have read the book. This is an app that has massive potential. I am a lurker on this app, and I'm really going to use this app in the future to track my reading progress. So if you want to chat with me on here, I am basically on here every once in a while. So if you catch me if you can. This is a brilliant app for finding new, should I say, reading buddies, people that are willing to chat to you about literature, about anything you're reading. So this is a brilliant way to connect with other readers. Download the app. It's in the description down below. And that is the end of today's video. And I hope you guys are having a great night. And I will see you in the next one.